So I have my crazy dubstep synth stuff happening, but I'm noticing that some of the slices are really loud and some are really quiet. Some are really bright, some are really bassy, some are really strong in the mid-range, some have a lot of resonance. They're really varied, and that's the beauty of it, but the problem is that can make it impossible to mix with anything else, and it can also just make it so that certain elements are just really kind of harsh and kind of hurt. We want to avoid kind of damaging our audience. So a multiband compressor is a great tool to put on this. This one synth line is kind of like full program material in that it's taking up from the lowest basses to the highest highs using the entire spectrum. So a multiband compressor will allow us set kind of maximums for each frequency range. And then I can just kind of control the spectrum overall, make it a little more consistent, and make it fit in my mix well. To do this, I'm going to be using iZotope's Ozone 5 Advanced plugin, which allows us to take the individual elements of Ozone and use it separately in a track. And I'll be using the Multiband Dynamics component right in this dubstep bass track. Let's see how that works. I have the dubstep bass track selected, and I'll just add iZotope Ozone 5 Dynamics. Right away, I'm going to open up a preset that I've set up for this demonstration, and I've called it Loudon Dubstep Bass Evener. I'll close this. So what we see here is I've set up 4 bands of compression. The first one goes from 20 hertz to 120 hertz, and that's meant to control kind of that sub-bass region, which though you think you want a lot of bass in dubstep, if you have too much, it's just going to overwhelm your mix. You're not going to hear the kick drum, and it's really going to make everything else be quieter. So you really want to control that pretty well, and actually you'll see that the thresholds for that are at negative 28 dB. So I'm really going to kind of push down on that bass quite a bit. My next band is kind of the main section where the dubstep bass kind of synth stuff is going to sound, and that's the mid-range to like low highs, and that's 120 hertz up to 2K. And that's going to be that kind of growly range. It's kind of really interesting. And you'll see that my thresholds are set the highest in that band. That's where I want this bass really to be most prominent. And then I have my thresholds a bit lower from 2K up to 10K. And then I really want to control that super high range. So the dubstep bass synth stuff is bright, and it's actually brighter than you might think, but we want to make sure it's not harsh, and we want to make sure that we control the very high end so that other elements can kind of peek through in the mix. So let's look at what each band has here. We have 3 thresholds for each band. This is a threshold for gating, and I'm not using the gating features at all, so I put that band all the way down. The next one is my compression, when I start compressing. So I'm saying from negative 130 dB up to negative 28 dB, do nothing. Just let the sound be as it is. When I get above 28 dB, start reducing the volume, right? And then when I get up to negative 13 dB, just stop it from getting any louder. So we kind of have this curve where we don't do anything in the quiet dynamics. We compress a little more at negative 28 dB, and then we just stop it at 13. So this top threshold, this negative 13, negative 2, negative 10, and negative 17, is kind of like an EQ contour. But what it's doing is establishing the maximum level at each one of those ranges. And then it's going to let it get up to that, but then stop it at that point. So this will tend to even out the bass across the whole thing, from each one of those slices. And let's hear it in action. So hit play. I can increase the input going to it. I'd like to take a moment to describe how these meters are working, because they're kind of a new type of meter for dynamics, and once you get used to them, it's really, really nice. So what we're seeing here is the entire dynamic range from nothing up to full digital max. And we're going to see this kind of histogram view, and that histogram is telling you at what dynamics the sound stays at the most. And you actually see 2 of them, one for input and one for output of that band. So let's hit it. So we see that the lighter gray, the kind of darker color, is going to be the input, and the lighter one is showing you what's kind of happening to that. So in this bass range, I'm compressing most of the time. You can see that I see when it came in, it was fairly loud, and then This area shows that it's pushing down on those. I'm compressing the mid-range quite a bit. This one I'm not doing much. And the high end is only really compressing at those really, really bright moments. So this compressor is just establishing maximums and kind of compressing as I get up to it, which works really well for just controlling this throughout.